The 1990s was a time when everything seemed to be getting edgier, and media was no different. But one of the most successful breakouts of this new edgy media style was Vice, which went from a small Montreal-based punk magazine in 1994 to a globally recognized media giant valued at $5.7 billion at its height in 2017.
Make a lot of money.
Yeah, I do alright for myself.
Vice's main reason for its explosive growth was, for lack of a better term, being hip with the youngsters. Not only did they create Emmy-winning reports and exposés on topics of international interest, but they also expanded into the topics of technology, environment, economics, and pop culture. To an extent, they had their hand in every media-related cookie jar, and their growth was unstoppable until around 2019 when it all started to fall apart. And finally, by 2023, there was the infamous bankruptcy. Now, it's important to note that when a business of this size fails, there's often dozens of small factors involved that compound on each other into the failure of a company. But in the interest of keeping this list and this video short, let's talk business and discuss the 3 biggest reasons that Vice Media Group went bankrupt, with the first issue being an inability to adapt. Now, I know that inability to adapt is kind of a catch-all term and a borderline cop-out when it comes to talking about reasons why companies failed. But this one is significant because at its height, Vice Media seemed to think that everything it touched would turn to gold. And as such, they believed they would keep growing even if they weren't expanding into every new medium that was attracting the younger crowd that they once appealed to. But the 90s up until now saw a tremendous rise in video platforms like YouTube and social media like Facebook, Instagram, and most recently TikTok. Now, it's not that they're not on these platforms entirely. They do have profiles on every one of them, but Vice seemed to have a belief that what was working for them before through their traditional news reports on TV and the articles they wrote on their website would continue to work for them afterwards. But as anyone who's young and on social media knows, that's not exactly how things happen. Their Facebook, for example, is just for posting articles. They don't really comment or interact or do anything aside from just copy and paste the link to the articles they've written on their website. And as such, their interaction is quite low, despite the fact that they have 6.5 million followers. Their YouTube has a similar issue, where it's just videos that have aired elsewhere that are just being thrown up on their channel, and their thumbnails are just screen caps with their logo tossed onto it. And this kind of boring model they've adopted is reflected in the views they get, as they only get a few 100,000 views on almost all of their videos, despite them having 17 million subscribers. Contrast this with a company like CNBC, and you can see what Vice is doing wrong. CNBC has 2 YouTube channels. One is called CNBC Television, and that's where they do what Vice is doing and just upload clips from news programs that run on traditional TV. But then they have a separate YouTube channel with videos that are made specifically for YouTube. These are longer videos with much better thumbnails that are made by people who obviously have expertise in YouTube, and it's clearly made for a YouTube audience. And while you might point out that Vice technically gets more views per month than CNBC, they only get about 50% more views, despite the fact that they have almost 600% more subscribers. With a reach that size, Vice should be absolutely killing the YouTube game, and quite simply, they're just not. And it gets even worse when you look at their TikTok, which is just a few minute clips from their programs uploaded. And then the few instances where they make original TikToks, they don't get very many views. This is despite the fact that TikTok is one of the most popular social media platforms, and Vice, at best, is making a half-hearted effort to expand to there. And this failure to expand to new platforms and adapt to a changing environment that constantly pulls young people away from one platform and into another is the first reason that Vice Media has filed for bankruptcy. The second reason is the changing landscape of digital advertising and why it's difficult for media companies to adapt properly. Now, this is a bit of an offshoot of the first issue in the inability to adapt, but unlike the first issue, this one is not entirely the fault of media companies. A lot of digital media companies, Vice included, are mostly ad-supported, but the issue with being ad-supported is you're in direct competition with huge tech companies like Facebook and Google. When you're part of your own ad network like Vice is, that means you're in charge of running your own ads. The big benefit of this is that you get to keep all the profits, and you have far more control over the advertising spaces that are surrounding your business. The downside of this is that you have to persuade advertisers to advertise on your network and websites instead of more household names like Facebook and Google. So as other advertising-based companies grew, the amount of advertisers that were willing to advertise on a much smaller network shrank. And as the number of advertisers slowly shrank, so did the profits that Vice was able to make off of their ads. And when you're almost entirely ad-supported, you can imagine why this was an issue. $5.7 $1.7 billion is a respectable number for a company, but it's not even close to the $1.5 trillion market cap of Google's parent company Alphabet, or the $671 billion market cap of Facebook's parent company Meta. So when you're less than 1/10 of the size of your competition, it can be very difficult to actually compete, since you don't have the same scale, data, and resources that the big boys do. And the final reason is the company-based scandals, and this is always the least fun one to talk about. In December of 2017, right at the peak of Vice's popularity and market valuation, the New York Times ran a huge hit piece on them, talking about the extensive and toxic culture that Vice had created, and more specifically, the culture of sexual harassment against female employees. And this, of course, absolutely blew up, as well it should have. Vice had spent so much time cultivating a young, trendy, edgy image for itself that this sudden revelation was a massive blow to the company's reputation. Instead of being the cool, hip company that young people loved, it was suddenly now just another giant company that fostered an environment of sexual harassment. And if you think about how dedicated Gen Z is towards holding companies that do this kind of thing accountable, it's not surprising that they immediately lost love for Vice. And then there's actually honestly not much more to say about this point. Vice fired some people and issued a statement that was an apology, and then tried to continue on as normal. But as you're well aware, normal would never really return to Vice, since that market expose marked the beginning of their fall from glory that they would never recover from. Especially in the digital news world, where any article you can find on one website is probably also available on another one, it's very easy to just decide not to support Vice, and instead to just read another publication. So while it's sad to see them fall from glory, it should also serve as a warning to other up-and-coming media brands. Just stay on top of the latest modern trends and see where the young people are going, and then don't foster an environment of sexual harassment, which honestly seems like a pretty low bar. Thanks for watching.